Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, Jo. Hello, David.
Hello. Hi, Chris. Hi, David. How are you?
You're both very lively this morning.
Because we haven't had a late night.
No, I know. It was very late. It's gone 11 o'clock when I got back from the from HQ in Salisbury yesterday.
Oh, you weren't with the bishop, were you, David?
You know, Chris, I was with the bishop. I mean, being such a senior member of the of the diocese, of course, I was at his one of his many farewell soirees last night. One day, Chris, you'll make it invited to this kind of thing.
So did you get invited to any of these, Jo?
No, because as you know, my whole life is just being second.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, it's a good place to be, second, a bit like Bishop Karen or Bishop Andrew. But they will step up, as you will one day.
I must decrease, so he must increase. That's how.
Yeah, well, I've increased far too much, so I'm now trying to decrease again. But yes, it was a lovely day. Saying goodbye to, and good night, but goodbye to Bishop Nicholas. I shall miss him in many ways. He's been quite a spiritual inspiration to me, and I'm sure to many other people as well. We will miss him, and we wish him well as he goes off to that town of great culture and excitement and no doubt late night partying in Brighton.
Very cosmopolitan.
I'm told so, yeah. With that ice cream.
Yeah. Nice sea swimming.
He could. In fact, you could go and teach him how to do it, couldn't you?
Yes, I'm assuming the bishop can swim already. Probably doesn't need teaching.
I don't know.
Do you think once he's retired, he'll tune in to Rev Chat to just keep?
I think we should send him an invite and remind him that what he's missing. There we are. But I did take him a present.
Oh, what did you take him?
Well, you see, it was lovely because he showed some of his presents. Thankfully, he didn't show the one I took him. He showed the beautiful icon he was given by St Oswald School in Salisbury, which he's very proud of because it's the only Anglican Roman Catholic or Roman Catholic Anglican secondary school in the diocese. And the head teacher was there, and that was lovely. And they had a beautiful icon for him. Of Jesus with the shepherd with the sheep around his neck, and the head teacher had reminded him that the Pope had said that every priest should smell of the sheep, which was lovely. He then showed the wonderful stained glass window the cathedral had given, a little one made out of glass that had been, taken out of windows in the cathedral over centuries, and wood from one of the doors that had been repaired. A lovely stone plinth off part of the cathedral that had been taken off when it had been repaired, of a bishop. Because he had to remember that bishops come and go. And I took him a tea towel.
I was going to say, was it a tea towel? How funny. Was it from the pound shop?
It wasn't from the pound shop, Jo, no. It was from our office in Stella and Camilla. It was a tea towel of the map of Dorset made up with all the names of the villages.
Oh, lovely.
And I took him this and said to him, though, that he could remember the best part of the diocese and also long journeys, which was always a comment, as you know, he used to make to us when we came home from the cathedral. It didn't take you long to get home. So I took him a tea towel and I told him that I'd been told by my wife that men are allergic to tea towels, but he must use it.
Oh, well,
I'll agree with the allergic bit.
Sorry?
I'll agree with the allergic bit.
Good. So, yes, a good time. Thank you very much. It was late, of course, and I had to take the beloved dog out for a walk because she'd missed it that evening. So it was fairly late by the time I got to writing the update last night.
Excellent.
So there we are. So shall we have our pause, and then Mr. Grass, are you going to read for us?
I can read for you today.
Lovely. Let's pause.
Today's reading is from Mark chapter 6, the rejection of Jesus at Nazareth and the mission of the 12. So Jesus left that place and came to his hometown, and his disciples followed him. On the Sabbath, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astonished. And they said, "Where did this man get all this? What is this wisdom that has been given to him? What deeds of power are being done by his hands? Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offence at him. Then Jesus said to them, "Prophets are not without honour except in their hometown, and among their own kin, and in their own house." And Jesus could do no deed of power there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and cured them. And he was amazed at their unbelief. Then he went about among the villages teaching. He called the 12 and began to send them out 2 by 2, and gave them authority over the unclean spirits. He ordered them to take nothing for their journey except a staff, no bread, no bag, no money in their belts, but to wear sandals and not to put on 2 tunics. He said to them, "Wherever you enter a house, stay there until you leave the place. If any place will not welcome you and they refuse to hear you, as you leave, shake off the dust that is on your feet as a testimony against them." So they went out and proclaimed that all should repent. They cast out many demons and anointed with oil many who were sick and cured them.
David's muted. You're muted, David.
Yes, I was. I said a lot of good stuff in that reading. It reminds me, as people in Beaminster know, Chris, you may not know too well. We have mentioned it before in Rev Chat. My mother was full of mysterious sayings which seemed of no importance and quite strange. But she used to say to us, the children, and you mentioned one of them there about taking offence, because she'd say, if you take offence, take the gate as well. And and so I couldn't help but smile when you read that in the passage. I think it's lovely. I like that bit of it. Again, Jesus is testing people's belief, isn't he? Last week we heard, "Why are you afraid? Do you not believe?" and things. And again, he says to them about their belief, or he was amazed at their unbelief. I wonder what he was expecting them to actually believe at that point.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? I love the bit. He could do no deed of power there except lay his hands on people, on the sick, and cure them. You know, a trivial little thing like curing the sick. I mean, just thought, oh, if only. Does that mean we're suffering from the unbelief that we can't cure the sick?
And it's the unbelief of others that limits his power. Yeah. Which is really intriguing.
Absolutely.
And they recognised. I like, where did he get all this? Where is the wisdom that's been given to him? What deeds of power have been done by his hands? And you want to shout, "It's because he's God." But I guess it's hard to imagine that he is divine when you see him, you've known him grow up and play the first century equivalent of football with his brothers, and
I read an interesting. I mean, it was a book of fiction. It was written by a lady in my previous parish, and she'd written a trilogy on Jesus in a Jewish society, and she admitted it was fiction, but there was nothing in the book that contradicted the Bible. But the book basically said that Jesus grew up. When he came back from Egypt, he grew up in the Essen community in South Israel, and there he studied with all the scribes, and that's where he actually studied hard and learned all his theology and learned all his Old Testament stories. Because it's an interesting one. I think it's an interesting question. Was this a pure divine revelation that Jesus suddenly knew all the Old Testament scriptures? Or did he study hard to learn it like the rest of us have to?
That is interesting. I mean, I've always assumed that he studied, because there's that reference to him sitting at the feet of the scribes, the teachers in the temple, isn't there?
Yeah.
When he's in Jerusalem.
I think it's also the thought, as you go back to what you just said about Jesus living in a Jewish society, that of course many of them would still not be recognising that the Messiah had come. So who is this person that's got power? Which is what it says. Is he the Messiah, or is he just another person claiming to be? And so as all that kind of mixture of stuff thrown in on top of what you both already said, people knew him, they'd grown up with him, they were amazed that he could know all the scriptures, because no one obviously knew all the scriptures, I wouldn't have thought, but he did appear to. And so it must have been a very confusing time for many of them.
Well, and we hear in the Gospels how a number of groups of people were on that same journey, weren't they, of understanding who Jesus was. It really is only demons who know who he is straight away, at least at this point in the Gospel. When demons declare that you are the Son of the Most High and get driven out by him, but most humans seem to be working through, they're seeing and hearing and piecing together the evidence, but it's difficult to... I guess Mary, that's an interesting one, although we're in Mark's Gospel and Luke tells us much more about Mary. But, if we take Luke's Gospel to give us some information, she had the sense that, she knew that Jesus was God's son, and that was going to be a very heavy weight to bear for him and for her. But yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, and I think that second part, because it is a distinct two parts almost, that reading, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah,
you got that mission, which is part of where we are today in many ways. We've got to learn to go out, maybe in pairs, go light, don't need two coats and all the rest of it. And I think the one thing that that a lot of churches, and that includes us as part of that community, I'm good at, is acknowledging things quickly that aren't working and just shaking the dust off and going on to something else. I think a lot of people are afraid of being seen as failed if they stop something. And I think certainly Joe and I have tried very hard. If something isn't working, we stop it and try and get on, because that's what we're being asked, or is that what God is calling the church to do? No good keep on banging the drum for something that no one is interested in or isn't hearing. How do we tell the story in a different way?
I think that's been really challenging over the last year or so. Companies and institutions that have been able to be nimble and react quickly and adapt have been able to flourish. And I think sometimes, that we don't take this commission seriously enough about being light and being sent out, and then moving on when things are not, like you say, when things don't go well, or where we're not welcomed. Shake the dust off our feet and do something different, go in a different direction. We're not always nimble as we should be, because we're turning around an institution which is like a oil tanker, whereas this is the little boat bit, isn't it? If the Church of England is an enormous tanker that takes days to stop and turn round, then being sent out as missionaries is the equivalent of the little boats or a paddleboard. You're very nimble and you can move quickly and do different things.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I try to look at it slightly differently, because I don't think God wants us to turn around. I think he just wants us to set the right direction. Turning
Well,
red
I'd
just
be
takes you.
turning around.
Turning red just takes you back to where you started if you're not careful.
Well,
But I agree. I agree with in many ways what you said. I think it is this. We're not good at hearing or listening or sensing the direction that we need to go in, and that's part of the national discussions, isn't it, of the Church of England? How do we become, younger, fitter, bolder, whatever the adjectives are we're meant to remember about going forward, about change. Change is one of these things that the Church of England has never been particularly fond of, or certainly a lot of people who sit in the pews have never been fond of. It's a kind of feared thing. And we all know that in reality, now is that almost crossroads in the church's life, one which has been met many times. Bishop Nicholas said last night, change began with the Reformation. We're just now in a different stage of that change, which started 300 years or more ago. And I think
I sometimes take a slightly different tack on this idea of change. I sometimes think we're so obsessed with change that we lose what we're doing. When I speak to parents about baptisms and things, the fact that they're saying the Apostles' Creed, which was written 1,700 years ago, and the content of that creed has not changed, they find quite mind-blowing. And in a world where if your mobile phone's 6 months old, you're out of date, and you've got to update, actually, I think we have a message that says, you know what, we're not chasing the latest trends. God is the same.
No, I agree with you in terms of message. The message that Jesus was teaching 2,000 years ago is the same one that we proclaim now, of loving your neighbour, loving God, loving your enemies, kindness, compassion, saving through death and resurrection. Those haven't changed at all, have they? But I think sometimes we confuse faith and doctrine with tradition and how we've always done it. And maybe sometimes we should lose that baggage a bit more. But I think you're not chucking the baby out with the bathwater, are you? You've got to.
I hope not when I'm baptising people.
No, definitely not.
That's part of the teaching we've always received, isn't it? About that the church goes with doctrine and tradition, and it's what we understand about tradition. Tradition is only what you set it. As I've said many times, if we started to parade a cat on a cushion down the aisle every Sunday for 6 weeks, if you stopped on the 7th week, people would moan because by then it's become tradition, and I think it's how we handle that understanding of tradition, and how we keep it updated and modern for today's world and needs, really.
What is interesting, though, we've ended up in a discussion about the church again, and the passage is about being sent out into the community, which is a very different thing.
It is, but I think it's about being sent out of that central community, isn't it?
Yes.
I don't know what the community wasn't, but they were sent out from it to bring people to faith. And I guess in those days, bringing them into faith meant bringing them into some kind of worshipping community.
But we don't know that, do we? Because it's interesting. I mean, we're talking about the gaps, which is a good Jewish discipline of imagining imagining into the gaps, what isn't there. What we don't know is what they were bringing them to, because there's no record of community as such. They were itinerant and they were travelling, weren't they? So what were they bringing people into? That's a really good.
Well, we do know what they were bringing them to. They were bringing them to what they had, and what they had would have been synagogue worship, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean, I always remember that, on the Sabbath, Jesus began to teach in the synagogue. So that must have been their tradition. That was the tradition Jesus was brought up in. But he still valued the synagogue on a Saturday and the teaching. We've still got to do this teaching, which can be quite hard because people don't seem to want to know the same teaching these days. And we're perceived often actually of having our teaching out of date and behind society.
Well, the Methodists have made a very bold statement about that this week, haven't they?
They have. They have. We'll see how many people would walk away from it. The staunch traditionalists, I would imagine. They'll have a home in the Church of England, though, so you're, so you're okay. So you're okay. But it actually was quite interesting based on that. I was having a conversation with one of our church members from one of the villages as it happened earlier this week, or maybe late last week, about this tradition of Sunday for a lot of people being the only day you go to church. And what the conversation that this person brought up is why can't we worship across our villages at other times of the week, so long as there is somewhere for people who still want Sundays to be able to go on a Sunday, even if it means having to travel outside of your own community? Why can't your community meet, on a different day? It doesn't have to be in the church, could be in somebody's house, they were prepared to say, or in the village hall, or accept the fact that, why don't we, when things are able to be, include perhaps even that in school? If you're saying we worship with children in school, why not invite them into the worshipping community? I think that's the first time in a long time I've heard somebody actually beginning to acknowledge that Sunday, whilst the traditional day, the Sabbath, isn't the only day that we can worship God, and doesn't have to be in a building that people are almost, almost stuck to, or welded to, if you're not careful. That was an interesting discussion.
I think that's all I've got to offer.
Yeah.
Run out of things to
Well,
say.
there we are. Yeah, no, I think good. Well, we started off discussing fellowship and food at the beginning, and after this wonderful and glorious moment has closed down and recording has stopped, we need to have a discussion about food again, don't we, Mr. Grask, for next week's Grand Clergy Deanery Barbecue?
Yes, we do. We do. Won't that be fun? I must make sure my garden's looking respectable.
Yes, we'd accept nothing less than that if we're coming round. I hope Mrs. Grask is aware that you're inviting us all round.
Yeah, but if you come after she's gone to work and you leave before she comes home.
I'm saying nothing. I'm sorry. I cannot condone this sort of behaviour from my clergy colleagues in the deanery.
And I can guarantee I would not get away with that sort of behaviour.
I don't think you would, Mr. Grask. I'm sure Mrs. Grask would have the rod of iron.
Oh, I'm sure she would.
I think we're going to stop now before we get Chris into any more trouble.
No, we don't need to get him into any more trouble. He's quite capable, Mrs. Neary, of doing that for himself, I'm sure. But yes, it's been lovely. You can watch on Mr. Grask. Off you go.
The Eggardon and Colmers Benefice Church website, Eggardon and Colmers Benefice Facebook page.
And Mrs. Neary?
Find us at beaminsterteam.org on our website, or at Beaminster Team across social media, and on YouTube. We would love to see you.
We would, including Bishop when he retires. Do tune in if you're watching now.
And let us know.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.